Only the Paranoid Survive, by Andrew S. Grove. Introduction. Picture this. It's November 22, 1994. The Tuesday before Thanksgiving. Andy Grove, the CEO of Intel Corporation, one of the most powerful and respected technology companies on the planet, is in the middle of teaching a class at Stanford University. He's a brilliant man, a Hungarian immigrant who survived the Nazis and the Soviets, came to America, and helped build Silicon Valley from the ground up. On this particular morning, his world is about to be turned upside down. His phone rings. It's his head of communications. A CNN news crew is on its way to Intel headquarters. They've heard about a tiny, almost imperceptible flaw in Intel's brand new flagship product, the Pentium processor. A flaw so small that an average user might only encounter it once every 27,000 years. A rounding error. Insignificant, right? Wrong. In the days that followed, that tiny flaw erupted into a full-blown corporate nightmare. Headlines screamed from every major newspaper. TV reporters camped outside their headquarters. The internet, then a new and mysterious force, was buzzing with anger and ridicule. The crisis culminated in a single, devastating moment when IBM, the company that had once made Intel preeminent, announced it was halting all shipments of computers with Pentium chips. The tidal wave hit, and Intel was forced to take a nearly $500 million write-off, the equivalent of half a year's entire research and development budget. Grove, a man who had navigated the brutal, cutthroat world of technology for decades, felt completely lost. He wrote, "I worked hard during the day, but when I headed home I got instantly depressed. I felt we were under siege, under unrelenting bombardment. Why was this happening?" Something had changed. The old rules no longer applied. And in that crucible of crisis, Andy Grove learned the single most important lesson of his career, a lesson he distilled into a powerful three-word mantra that gives this book its title, Only the Paranoid Survive. This isn't just a business book. It's a survival guide for a world that is constantly, and often brutally, changing. Andy Grove, through his incredible journey, became one of the most revered business leaders of the 20th century, and this book is his masterpiece. It sold millions of copies and has been a guiding light for entrepreneurs and executives in every industry imaginable. Today, we're going to unpack the wisdom of Andrew S. Grove. I promise you, by the end of our time together, you won't just understand his ideas, you'll gain a new lens through which to see the world. You'll learn how to spot the moments of massive change before they hit, how to navigate them when they do, and how to emerge from the chaos stronger than before. This isn't just about big companies, it's about your career, your education, your life. Because as Grove warns us, sooner or later, something fundamental in your business world will change, and being ready for that moment is the key to everything. Book summary. So, what was that mysterious force that turned a tiny technical glitch into a $500 million catastrophe for Intel? Grove came to realize it wasn't just one thing. It was a perfect storm created by a fundamental shift in the world around him. He calls this kind of shift a strategic inflection point. Now, that might sound a bit academic, but let me break it down for you. Imagine you're paddling a canoe down a calm, wide river. For years, you've known exactly how to handle the currents. You know where the rocks are. You know the best path. It's predictable. You're successful. Then, without warning, the river bends, and you hear a roar. The water starts moving faster. The calm river has turned into Class VX rapids, the kind of deadly, turbulent water that even professional rafters approach with fear. Everything you knew about paddling is suddenly useless. Your old techniques don't work anymore. You are at an inflection point. The business, the river, has fundamentally changed, and you have two choices: adapt to the new reality, or get smashed against the rocks. Grove says these inflection points are caused by what he calls a 10x change. This is when one of the key forces affecting your world, your competition, your technology, your customers, suddenly becomes 10 times stronger, or 10 times different, than it was before. It's the difference between a breeze and a hurricane. To understand this, Grove gives us a simple map. Think of any business, or even your own career, as being influenced by 6 key forces. 1. Your existing competitors, the other players on the field. 2. Your suppliers, the people you depend on to do your work. 3. Your customers, the people you serve. 4. Your potential competitors, the ones who aren't in your game yet, but could be. 5. Your complementers, these are your allies. The people whose products or services make yours more valuable. Think of how software needs computers, and computers need software. They are fellow travelers on the same road. 6. And the 6th force, the one Grove says is the most deadly of all, the possibility that what you do can be done in a completely different way. Substitution. A strategic inflection point happens when one of these 6 forces experiences a 10x change. The balance shifts, the old rules dissolve, and a new game begins. You might be sailing along, feeling successful, and not even realize the wind has changed until your boat suddenly heels over, on the verge of capsizing. In Intel's case, 2 forces had changed by 10x. First, their customers. For years, Intel's customers were computer engineers at companies like IBM. They spoke the same language. But through their Intel Inside marketing campaign, Intel had accidentally created a new customer, you, the end user. When the Pentium flaw hit, it wasn't engineers calling them. It was millions of regular people who now saw Intel as a household name, like Coca-Cola, and they felt betrayed. Second, the rise of the Internet created a 10x change in communication. A single math professor's complaint, which in the old days might have been a quiet letter, was now amplified to a global audience overnight. The rules had changed, and Intel was the last to know. This experience taught Grove a crucial lesson. The person in charge, the CEO, the leader, is often the last one to see the inflection point coming. He writes, he, like most CEOs, is in the center of a fortified palace, and news from the outside has to percolate through layers of people from the periphery where the action is. The people on the front lines, the salespeople, the junior engineers, the customer service reps, they feel the winds of change first. They are the ones on the edge of the company, where the snow first begins to melt. The challenge for any leader, whether of a company or of their own life, is to expose themselves to that periphery. To listen to the unsettling news, to seek out the people who are telling you that something is wrong, even when you don't want to hear it. To truly grasp the power of a 10x change, Grove takes us back to the 1980s and tells the epic story of the morphing of the computer industry. It's one of the most profound business transformations in modern history, and it perfectly illustrates how an entire world can be remade. Before the inflection point, the computer industry was vertical. Think of it like a set of tall, separate skyscrapers. You had IBM, DEC, Wang, and others. Each company built its own everything. IBM designed its own computer chips, built its own computers in its own factories, wrote its own operating system software, created its own applications, and sold the whole package with its own sales team. If you bought from IBM, you were in the IBM skyscraper from top to bottom. You were locked into their proprietary world. It was a battle of one giant, self-contained system against another. Then, a 10x force of change appeared, the microprocessor. This tiny silicon chip allowed for the creation of the personal computer, the PC. And the PC offered a cost-effectiveness that was 10 times greater than the old way. Suddenly, You could have the computing power that once filled a room sitting on your desk for a fraction of the cost. This 10x force shattered the vertical skyscrapers and rearranged the industry into a new, horizontal structure. Imagine those skyscrapers being laid on their side, becoming different layers in a stack. At the bottom, you had the chip layer, with companies like Intel and Motorola competing. Above that was the computer hardware layer, with hundreds of companies like Compaq, Dell, and Packard Bell all building machines. Then came the operating system layer, dominated by Microsoft's DOS and later Windows. And on top, the application software layer, with countless companies creating word processors, spreadsheets, and games. In this new horizontal world, you, the customer, had the power. You could mix and match. You could buy an Intel chip inside a Dell computer, running Microsoft Windows and WordPerfect software, all purchased from a retail store. The old proprietary lock-in was broken. This transition was the valley of death for the old giants. They were kings of the vertical world. Their entire structure, their culture, their managers' instincts, everything was built for the old game. And they struggled to adapt. Grove tells a fascinating story of watching an IBM manager try to sell their new operating system, OS/2, to another computer maker. The meeting was awkward and tense. The IBM guy couldn't shake the feeling that he was talking to a competitor, not a partner. He was emotionally hamstrung by the old vertical mindset. The deal never happened, and OS/2 faded while Microsoft Windows took over the world. The more successful a company was in the old world, the harder it was for them to let go. Their success became a form of inertia, blinding them to the new reality. But while the old giants stumbled, new heroes emerged from practically nothing. Michael Dell started assembling computers in his dorm room, selling them directly to customers over the phone. In the old vertical world, this was an unnatural act. As Grove says, just as dogs don't fly, people don't buy mail-order computers, but in the new horizontal world, it was genius. Dell became a multi-billion-dollar company by understanding the new rules. Compaq became the fastest company in history to reach $1 billion in revenue because they embraced the horizontal model from day one. These companies weren't burdened by the past. They were born into the new world and instinctively knew how to win in it. The lesson here is profound. When a strategic inflection point hits, the skills that made you successful in the past can become your biggest liability. The very champions of the old era are often the last to adapt, and they tend to fall the hardest. It's a warning that echoes through every industry and every career. What works today will not necessarily work tomorrow, and clinging to past glories is a recipe for disaster. One of the most powerful things about Grove's message is that he shows us these inflection points are everywhere. They are not just a high-tech phenomenon. They are a fundamental force of life and business, happening all around us, all the time. He gives us a tour of history through this 10x lens. Think about competition. When a Walmart moves into a small town, it's not just another store. It's a 10x change. With its massive scale, satellite-linked logistics, and incredible purchasing power, it's a force of nature that the local mom-and-pop shop simply isn't equipped to handle. The rules of retail in that town change forever. To survive, the small store can't keep doing what it's always done. It has to change its game, specialize, offer incredible personal service, or redefine itself completely, like a bookstore that becomes a coffee house with books. Or consider a 10x change in technology. When sound came to movies in 1927 with The Jazz Singer, the world of cinema was shattered overnight. For the stars of silent film, this was a terrifying inflection point. Their entire craft was based on pantomime and expression. Now, they had to speak. Some, like Greta Garbo, adapted with incredible agility. Her studio famously advertised her first talking picture with billboards that simply said, "Garbo speaks." She made the transition and became an even bigger star. But many others couldn't. Charlie Chaplin, one of the greatest artists of his time, was in denial. As late as 1931, he defiantly said, "I give the talkies 6 months more." He was able to make successful silent films for a few more years, but eventually, even he had to surrender. The wave was just too powerful. The same thing happened in shipping. For centuries, loading and unloading ships was a slow, manual process. Then came containerization, the simple idea of putting cargo in standardized metal boxes. This introduced a 10x change in productivity. The entire industry was reordered. Ports like New York, which didn't have the space for the massive new equipment, went into decline. Meanwhile, places like Singapore and Seattle, which embraced the new technology, became the new kings of global shipping. Sometimes, the 10x change comes from your customers. Their tastes, their habits, their attitudes shift, often slowly and subtly at first. In the 1920s, Henry Ford dominated the car market with the Model T. His slogan was, "It takes you there and brings you back." The car was basic transportation. But after World War I, people started caring about style and status. Alfred Sloan at General Motors saw this shift. He offered a car for every purse and purpose, with varied product lines and annual model changes. By the end of the decade, GM had overtaken Ford and would lead the industry for more than 60 years. Ford's customers had left him, and he was slow to realize why. The lesson from all these stories is the same. Whether you're a silent film star, a shipping port, or a giant corporation, when the ground shifts beneath your feet, you must adapt. Denial is a death sentence. And this brings us to the most personal, most powerful story in the entire book, how Andy Grove and Intel faced their own valley of death. This is the story of how Intel was forced to kill the business it was founded on, the business that was its very identity. It's the crisis that taught Grove everything he knew about strategic inflection points, and it's a raw, honest look at leadership under fire. Intel was born in 1968 with one simple, brilliant idea: to use the ever-increasing power of semiconductor technology to build memory chips for computers. They were the pioneers. They practically invented the industry. For over a decade, Intel was memories. It was their identity, their pride, their technology driver. Everything new they learned, every manufacturing process they perfected, they did it on memory chips first. In the late 1970s and early 80s, they were on top of the world. They were one of the key players in a competitive but familiar game against other American companies. Then, the Japanese producers appeared on the scene. And it was an overwhelming 10x force. The stories that came back from Japan were terrifying. At one company, an entire building was dedicated to memory development, with different floors working on different generations of chips simultaneously. They had access to seemingly limitless capital, building massive, modern factories that dwarfed anything Intel had. Then came the quality issue. A report from Hewlett-Packard, a major customer, showed that the Japanese memory chips were substantially, shockingly better than the American ones. Grove's first reaction was pure denial. "This had to be wrong," he wrote. He and his team vigorously attacked the data. But when they confirmed it for themselves, the horrifying reality sank in. They were behind. The final weapon was price. The Japanese companies were engaged in a brutal price war, seemingly willing to lose money on every chip just to win market share. Grove recalls getting a hold of an internal memo from a Japanese competitor. It read, "Win with the 10% rule. Find Intel sockets. Quote 10% below their price. If they re-quote, go 10% again. Don't quit till you win." Intel fought back. They tried everything. They tried focusing on niche products, inventing special-purpose memories, pushing new technologies. But it was like trying to hold back the ocean. They were losing more and more money in the memory business every year. For a while, the booming success of their other product line, microprocessors, the brains of the new IBM PC, masked the bleeding. They could afford to lose money on memories. But in the fall of 1984, the whole industry hit a downturn. The safety net was gone. The losses from the memory business were no longer just a problem, they were a mortal threat to the entire company. The management team was paralyzed. They had endless meetings, arguments, and debates that went nowhere. Some wanted to go for it and build a gigantic factory to take on the Japanese head-on. Others wanted to bet on some avant-garde technology. They were trapped, wandering in what Grove calls the Valley of Death. One day, in the middle of 1985, after a year of this aimless struggle, Grove was in his office with Intel's co-founder and chairman, the legendary Gordon Moore. The mood was grim. Grove looked out the window, then turned to Moore and asked a hypothetical question. If we got kicked out and the board brought in a new CEO, what do you think he would do? Gordon Moore answered without a moment's hesitation. He would get us out of memories. Grove stared at him, numb. Then he said the words that changed Intel's history forever. Why shouldn't you and I walk out the door, come back in, and do it ourselves? That was the turning point. It was the moment of intellectual honesty that cut through all the emotion, all the history, all the denial. But it was just the beginning of a long, painful journey. Getting out of the memory business was almost inconceivable. How could we give up our identity? Grove wondered. He had trouble even saying the words out loud to his colleagues. It was like telling a family of farmers they had to leave the land they had worked for generations. The resistance inside the company was fierce. Two beliefs were as strong as religious dogmas. First, that memories were their technology driver, and second, that their salespeople needed a full product line to be successful. Getting out of memories violated both of these sacred tenets. The debate raged for months. But the insight of that simple question, what would an outsider do, gave Grove the clarity he needed. An outsider would have no emotional attachment to the past. They could see the cold, hard logic of the situation. To save the company, Grove and Moore had to become those outsiders. They finally made the decision. They would exit the memory business completely and refocus the entire company on microprocessors. They shut down factories, laid off thousands of employees, and braced for the reaction from their customers. And the reaction was a big yawn. Most of their customers had already seen the writing on the wall. They knew Intel wasn't a major player in memories anymore. Some of them even said, "It sure took you a long time." It was a painful, humbling lesson. People on the outside, without an emotional stake, can often see what needs to be done long before the people on the inside. By exiting the memory business, Intel freed up its best people and its most advanced factories to work on the 386 microprocessor. It was a massive bet, a redeployment of all their key resources toward a new future. The 386 became a phenomenal success, and it cemented Intel's new identity as a microcomputer company. By 1992, they had become the largest semiconductor company in the world, bigger even than the Japanese companies that had nearly destroyed them. They had walked through the valley of death and emerged on the other side, transformed and stronger than ever. The painful experience turned Grove into a better manager and gave him the hard-won wisdom that fills this book. He learned that inflection points are not a single moment, but a long, torturous struggle. And he learned that while the crisis is terrifying, it also provides an opportunity to break out of a plateau and catapult to a whole new level of achievement. So, you're in the middle of a storm. Things are confusing. The world feels like it's changing, but you're not sure how or why. How do you distinguish a true strategic inflection point, a signal, from the everyday chaos and challenges of business? The noise? This is one of the hardest parts of leadership, and Grove offers a brilliant set of tools to help us find clarity. First, he says, you have to encourage a culture of open and honest debate. The only way to sharpen your understanding is to subject your ideas to the scrutiny of smart people with different perspectives. This isn't about being nice, it's about being effective. Grove's Intel was famous for what they called constructive confrontation. It was a place where people could vigorously argue with each other, challenge ideas regardless of rank, and still remain friends. The goal wasn't to win the argument, but to find the truth. This kind of debate is crucial because, in the early stages of an inflection point, the data can be misleading. Data is always about the past. An inflection point is about the future. You have to rely on anecdotal observations, instincts, and the fearful warnings of people on the front lines. And this brings us to one of Grove's most important concepts, the role of the Cassandress. In Greek mythology, Cassandra was a priestess who was cursed to foretell the future but never be believed. In every organization, Grove says, there are Cassandras. They are the people, often in middle management or sales, who are quick to recognize impending change and cry out an early warning. They are your human radar system. They're usually on the periphery, exposed to the real world, and they feel the danger more immediately than senior managers in their comfortable headquarters. A lost sale directly affects a salesperson's commission. A new technology threatens an engineer's career. They take the warning signs personally. Your job as a leader is to find these Cassandras and listen to them. Really listen. Don't argue with them. Don't dismiss them as alarmists. The time you spend hearing them out is an investment in learning what's really happening at the edges of your world. When the snow melts, it melts at the periphery first. Grove tells a story of receiving a late-night email from a sales manager in Asia, who was deeply concerned about a new competitive development. Grove's initial reaction was to shrug it off. He felt safe back in California. But he had learned to respect the change in tone from people in the field. That one email prompted him to launch a broader study of the issue. But a word of warning, while you're listening for signals, you have to avoid the trap of the first version. When a new technology or a new idea emerges, the first version is often clunky, flawed, and unimpressive. It's easy to dismiss it. Grove admits he made this mistake himself. When Apple introduced the Macintosh in 1984, he thought it was a ridiculous toy. It was slow, and it didn't even have a hard drive. He was so blinded by the problems of the first version that he missed the revolutionary beauty of the graphical user interface that lay beneath. You can't judge the significance of a potential 10x change by the quality of its first attempt. You have to use your imagination. Ask yourself, what would this be like if it were 10 times better, 10 times faster, 10 times cheaper? If the answer is that it would be transformative, then you may be looking at the beginning of a strategic inflection point, no matter how crummy the first version looks. So, how do you put this all together to make a decision? Grove suggests a few key questions to ask yourself. Is your key competitor about to change? He suggests the silver bullet test. If you had one silver bullet, which competitor would you use it on? When the answer to that question starts to get fuzzy, or when new names start popping up, it's a sign that the competitive landscape is shifting. Is your key competitor, your most important ally, about to change? If the company that used to matter most to you seems less important now, that's another warning sign. Do people around you seem to be losing it? Do smart, competent people suddenly seem out of touch? It might not be them. It might be that the reality of your business, has changed around them. The process of navigating this is messy. Grove says you have to be willing to let chaos reign. This is the period of experimentation. Let people try different things, explore different paths, Go after different customers. The old order won't give way to the new without a period of disorder and exploration in between. But this period of chaos can't last forever. The second phase is just as important. You have to rein in chaos. Once you've explored, debated, and experimented, and a new direction begins to emerge, the leader's job shifts dramatically. The time for listening and exploring is over. It's time to lead. And leading an organization out of the valley of death is one of the hardest things a manager ever has to do. First, Grove says, you must form a clear, simple, and powerful mental image of what the company will look like when you get to the other side. This isn't some lofty, abstract vision statement. It needs to be a crisp, single phrase that everyone can remember and understand. When Intel decided to become the microcomputer company, that was their rallying cry. It told everyone what they were and, just as importantly, what they were not anymore. They were no longer a memory company. This clarity is absolutely critical. An organization that is confused and demoralized cannot pursue multiple, vague objectives. They need a single, compelling goal to unite them. As Mark Twain said, put all of your eggs in one basket and watch that basket. Hedging your bets dilutes commitment and energy. In the valley of death, the greatest danger is standing still. Once you have this clear direction, you must lead through strategic actions, not just strategic plans. A strategic plan is a statement of what you intend to do. A strategic action is something you have already done. It's a concrete step that signals your new direction. It could be reassigning your best manager to a risky new project. It could be shutting down an old product line. It could be you, the leader, changing how you spend your own time. Your calendar, Grove insists, is your most important strategic tool. How you spend your time has enormous symbolic value. It communicates what's important far more powerfully than any speech. When Intel was transforming, Grove deliberately started spending a huge amount of his time meeting with software company CEOs. He had to swallow his pride and admit how little he knew about their world. He basically went back to school. This sent a powerful message throughout Intel: software is our future. This process of redeploying resources, your best people, your money, your own time, is the engine of transformation. It's easy to say you're changing, but the real test is what you're willing to take resources away from. And you must act before it's too late. It's always best to make these changes while your existing business is still healthy, while you still have the cash flow and momentum to provide a protective bubble for your experiments. But the reality is, most of us wait too long. We do too little, too late. Grove's advice is to correct for this tendency. Act sooner and with greater magnitude than your instincts tell you. The consequences of being late are far more severe than the consequences of being early. Finally, you must be a role model for the new strategy. You have to over-communicate, over-clarify, and project your determination and vision to every corner of the organization. Use email, hold town hall meetings, walk the floors. Answer every question, especially the tough ones that start with "but does this mean?" Those questions are your best opportunity to bring the message home. Grove argues that the most adaptive organizations are the ones that have a healthy dynamic between bottom-up and top-down actions. The bottom-up actions come from the Cassandras, the middle managers on the periphery who are experimenting and sensing change. The top-down actions come from senior management, who must provide the clarity, direction, and resources to rein in the chaos and lead the entire organization on a determined march toward the new goal. It's a pendulum-like swing between letting chaos reign and reining in chaos. Surviving a strategic inflection point is not an intellectual exercise. It's a gut-wrenching, emotional, and personal trial. It requires humility, courage, and a relentless focus on the harsh realities of the outside world. It is, in the end, a test of character. Commentary. As we step back and look at the powerful ideas in Only the Paranoid Survive, what's truly remarkable is how timeless they are. This book was written in the mid-1990s, at the dawn of the commercial internet, but its lessons feel like they could have been written this morning. That's because Andy Grove didn't just write a book about the tech industry. He wrote a book about the fundamental nature of change itself. The central idea, the strategic inflection point, is a mental model that, once you understand it, you start seeing everywhere. You see it in the rise of streaming services and the decline of cable television. You see it in the explosion of artificial intelligence and the questions it raises for countless professions. You see it in the shift to remote work and how it's reshaping our cities and our careers. Grove gave us a name and a framework for those terrifying, exhilarating moments when the whole world seems to tilt on its axis. What I find most profound, though, is the deeply human element of his message. This isn't a book about spreadsheets and 5-year plans. It's a book about fear, denial, courage, and identity. Grove is brutally honest about how hard it is for successful people and successful organizations to change. The inertia of success, as he calls it, is a powerful force. We become defined by what we've done, and it's incredibly difficult to let go of that identity, even when it's leading us toward a cliff. His solution, the "What would a new CEO do?" thought experiment, is pure genius in its simplicity. It's a mental trick to force ourselves into a state of intellectual objectivity. It allows us to cut through our own emotional baggage and see our situation with the clear, unsentimental eyes of an outsider. This is a tool you can apply to any area of your life where you feel stuck, whether it's a career path, a relationship, or a personal habit. What would an objective outsider, with no attachment to your past, tell you to do? The answer is often painfully obvious, and deeply liberating. And then there's the title itself, Only the Paranoid Survive. At first, it sounds like a recipe for a stressful, anxious life. But as you read the book, you realize Grove's paranoia isn't about neurotic anxiety. It's about a state of heightened, vigilant awareness. It's the opposite of complacency. It's the humility to know that no matter how successful you are today, there is a 10x force of change brewing somewhere that could make your skills obsolete tomorrow. It's the discipline to constantly scan the horizon, to listen to the Cassandras, and to have the courage to act on unsettling information. So, what can you, a curious and ambitious person on the cusp of your own career, take away from this? First, own your career as your own business. Grove says it best, nobody owes you a career. You own it as a sole proprietor. You have one employee, yourself. In a world of constant inflection points, the idea of a stable, lifelong job at one company is a relic of the past. You are responsible for protecting your personal business, for updating your skills, and for positioning yourself to benefit from change. Second, become a student of the periphery. Don't just focus on the mainstream curriculum or the obvious career path. Pay attention to the weird, emerging trends. What are the first versions of new technologies that everyone else is dismissing? Who are the Cassandras in your field, the people whose warnings seem a little bit out there? Cultivate a healthy paranoia about the stability of your chosen path. And third, practice the courage of intellectual honesty. Be willing to ask yourself the hard questions. Is the path I'm on still the right one, or am I just continuing out of inertia? What would an outsider, looking at my life, advise me to change? It takes guts to confront these questions, and even more to act on the answers. But as Andy Grove's incredible story shows us, it is the only way to not just survive, but to thrive in a world that never, ever stands still. That was a journey through Only the Paranoid Survive by Andrew S. Grove. We've explored the core ideas today, but I'll be honest with you, a summary can only ever be a map of the territory. The real adventure happens when you walk the path yourself. It's in the quiet moments, when one of Grove's raw, personal stories or a simple, powerful phrase connects with your own experience in a way you didn't expect. This summary is a doorway, designed to help you see if the world inside is one you want to explore. If anything we've talked about today has resonated with you, I truly encourage you to grab a copy. Reading it isn't just about learning business strategy, it's an experience that can genuinely change the way you see the challenges and opportunities in your own life. Also, if you found some wisdom in our conversation today, a simple like and subscribe goes a long way. It helps us share these timeless lessons with more people who are looking to grow. Let's continue this journey together, learning from the greatest minds on the billionaire's bookshelf.